The irony of being a cultural anthropologist is that I spend my life uncovering other people's secrets while desperately hiding my own. Standing in the bustling hotel ballroom, watching the wedding preparations unfold, I felt that familiar ache in my chest, the one that's been there for 24 years since the day I gave up my baby boy. My name is Prudence, and today my daughter Aurora is getting married. I should be focused solely on her happiness, but my hands are trembling as I adjust the flower arrangements, trying to keep myself busy. Mom, stop fussing with everything. Aurora laughs, swatting my hands away from the centerpiece I've rearranged 3 times. The flowers are perfect. You're more nervous than I am. If she only knew. Sorry, sweetheart, just want everything to be perfect for you and Hector. His name catches in my throat, like it has since the day Aurora first introduced us 6 months ago. Speaking of Hector, my sister Quinn's voice cuts through the air like a knife. Have you seen him yet today, Prudence? He's such a wonderful young man. So, well-bred. I catch the slight emphasis she puts on those last words, the familiar judgment in her tone. Quinn has always been expert at wielding words like weapons. He's getting ready with the groomsmen, Aurora says, oblivious to the tension. Dad's helping them with their boutonnieres. My father Franklin appears in the doorway, his once commanding presence now diminished by age, but no less intimidating to me. The men are all set, he announces, then fixes me with a look that still makes me feel 16. Prudence, a word. I follow him into the hallway where he straightens his tie unnecessarily. I trust you're keeping yourself together today? Of course, Father. Why wouldn't I be? Don't play coy. This wedding, it must bring up certain memories. Before I can respond, Hector himself rounds the corner, adjusting his cufflinks. My heart stops. In that moment, as he raises his hand to wave, I see it. The distinctive crescent-shaped birthmark on his right palm, identical to the one I memorized in the few precious hours I held my son before they took him away. Hi, Prudence, Hector calls out cheerfully. Everything looking good in there? I force myself to breathe, to smile. Perfect. You look very handsome. Thanks, though I'm nervous as hell. He laughs, running that marked hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it makes my chest ache. Never thought I'd be lucky enough to marry someone like Aurora. My father clears his throat. Perhaps you should check on the bride, Prudence. Actually, I say, seizing the moment, Hector, I've been meaning to ask, that birthmark on your hand, it's quite unique. His face lights up. Oh yeah, my mom, my adoptive mom, I mean, always said it was my lucky charm. Born with it. I see my father stiffen beside me. Quinn appears as if summoned, her heels clicking rapidly across the marble floor. Hector, dear, the photographer wants some pre-ceremony shots with the groomsmen. Right, of course. He gives me another warm smile. My smile, I realize with a jolt. And heads off. Quinn grabs my arm, her fingers digging in. What do you think you're doing? I pull away. Interesting that you never mentioned Hector was adopted when Aurora first introduced him. Why would I? It's not exactly dinner conversation, is it? No, I say quietly. But it might have been relevant information for me. Our father steps between us. This is neither the time nor place. When is the time, Father? When was it ever the time to discuss what you and Quinn did? Prudence, he warns, but I'm already walking away, my mind racing. Back in the bridal suite, Aurora is twirling in her dress while her cousin Tiffany takes photos on her phone. Mom, what do you think? She asks, beaming. I look at my beautiful daughter about to marry her own brother and feel the weight of 2 decades of secrets threatening to crush us all. You look perfect, sweetheart, I manage to say. Tiffany, ever observant, tilts her head. Are you okay, Aunt Prudence? You look like you've seen a ghost. In a way, I have. The ghost of a baby boy with a crescent moon on his palm, coming back to haunt us all. As I watch Aurora adjust her veil, I realize I have less than an hour to decide whether to speak up or let this wedding proceed. Either choice promising to shatter our family forever. My phone buzzes with a text from Quinn. Don't you dare ruin this day. Remember what's at stake. I delete the message and look up to see Hector's adoptive mother Susan entering the room, carrying a box of old family photos she wants to display at the reception. As she sets it down, a single photograph slips out, a baby's hand with a familiar crescent-shaped mark. My heart stops. The truth isn't just knocking anymore, it's breaking down the door. I couldn't take my eyes off that fallen photograph. Before Susan could notice, I snatched it up, my hands shaking as I stared at the image that confirmed my worst fears. "Oh, that's one of Hector's baby pictures," Susan said, reaching for it. "He was such a beautiful child." "He was 6 months old here?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Yes. How did you know?" "Because I had an identical photo hidden in my desk at home, taken the day before I signed the adoption papers." Before I could respond, Quinn appeared in the doorway. "Susan, could you help with the guest book setup?" And Prudence a moment. Quinn practically dragged me into an empty conference room, closing the door with unnecessary force. "Stop this right now." "Stop what? Recognizing my own son? Lower your voice." She glanced nervously at the door. "You gave up any right to call him that 24 years ago." The memories flooded back, being 16, pregnant, terrified. Quinn, 20 at the time, standing beside our father as he laid out my options. "You mean when you and father forced me to give him up? We gave you a chance at a real life. Look at you now, successful, respected. Would that have happened if you'd been a teenage mother? You don't know that. You never gave me the choice." "Choice?" Quinn laughed bitterly. "You were a child yourself. Father made the right decision. The right decision. To arrange my son's adoption through your husband's law firm. To never tell me where he went. And now, by some cosmic joke, he's marrying his own sister." Quinn's face went pale. "You can't prove anything." "That birthmark is proof enough. And that photo. Photos can be coincidental." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Think about what you're considering. You'll destroy everything. Aurora's happiness, Hector's life, this whole family." "This family?" I spat the words. "The one that shipped me off to Aunt Martha until the baby was born? The one that told everyone I was at a special academic program? We protected you. You protected yourselves, your reputations, your precious social standing." A knock at the door made us both jump. Tiffany poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but Aurora's asking for both of you. It's almost time." Quinn composed herself instantly, smoothing her dress. "Of course, dear. We'll be right there." As Tiffany left, Quinn grabbed my arm. "Listen to me carefully. You have exactly 1 hour to decide if you want to blow up everyone's lives. Think about Aurora. Think about what this would do to her." I pulled away from her grip. "I am thinking about Aurora and Hector and the truth they both deserve to know." Back in the bridal suite, Aurora was putting on her grandmother's pearl necklace, a family heirloom that should have gone to me, but Quinn had somehow ended up with it. "Mom, can you help me with the clasp?" As I fastened the pearls, I caught our reflection in the mirror. Mother and daughter, secrets and lies stretched between us like invisible threads. Aurora's eyes met mine in the glass. "You seem sad," she said softly. "Just emotional. It's a big day." "Tell me about it." She turned to face me. "You know what's funny? Sometimes I look at Hector and see something so familiar, like I've known him my whole life. Isn't that crazy?" My heart clenched. "Not crazy at all." Bentley, Quinn's husband, appeared in the doorway. "5 minutes until we start. Everyone ready?" I watched him exchange a loaded glance with Quinn. He knew. Of course he knew. His law firm had handled the adoption. How many of them had been in on this conspiracy of silence? "Actually," I said, "I need to check something in my car. I'll be right back." I hurried to the parking lot, yanked open my car door and grabbed my laptop bag. Inside was a worn manila envelope I'd carried to every major event in my life for the past 24 years, waiting for the right moment, or maybe the wrong one, to open it. Inside were my copies of the adoption papers, a handful of photos, and a letter I'd written to my son but never sent. The final item was a DNA test I'd taken 6 months ago after first meeting Hector. I hadn't opened the results yet, too afraid of what they might confirm. "What are you doing?" I turned to find my father standing there, leaning on his cane. The years hadn't been kind to him, but his eyes were still sharp as ever. "Getting proof," I said, holding up the envelope. "Proof will only hurt them both." He stepped closer. "You want revenge, Prudence? Fine. Take it out on me, but leave those kids alone." "This isn't about revenge. It's about truth." "Truth?" He shook his head. "Truth is what we make it. Right now, the truth is that two young people are in love and about to start their lives together. They're siblings, Father. That's the truth. They're strangers who fell in love, unless you destroy that with your selfish need for closure." The wedding march began to play faintly from inside the hotel. Time was up. I had to decide, right now, whether to let my children commit an innocent but horrible mistake or tear their world apart with the truth. I clutched the envelope tighter and headed back inside. The envelope felt like it was burning through my clutch bag as I made my way back to the bridal suite. Aurora was already lined up with her bridesmaids, but I caught Susan alone in the hallway, straightening Hector's boutonniere in a way that made my heart ache. "Susan," I said, keeping my voice low, "could we talk for a moment? About Hector's adoption?" Her hands froze on the flowers. "What about it?" "The agency that handled it. Was it Riverside Family Services?" "How did you—" She stepped back, studying my face. "Why are you asking these questions today of all days?" Before I could respond, Tiffany appeared beside us, her junior detective instincts clearly triggered by our hushed conversation. "Aunt Prudence, I've been meaning to tell you something interesting. I've been doing some research for my criminology class, practicing with adoption records." Quinn materialized as if summoned by the word adoption, cutting Tiffany off mid-sentence. "Shouldn't you be in line with the other bridesmaids, dear?" "But I found something." "Now, Tiffany." I watched my niece reluctantly join the lineup, making a mental note to find her later. Susan was still looking at me strangely, but Bentley appeared and whisked her away to her seat, shooting me a warning glance over his shoulder. The wedding coordinator began arranging everyone for the processional. I should have been focusing on Aurora, but my eyes kept drifting to Hector at the altar. The way he stood, the slight tilt of his head, they were mirror images of my father in his younger days. "Last chance, Prudence." Quinn's whisper carried more threat than concern. "Once that ceremony starts." "You knew," I hissed back. "You knew he was back in our lives the moment Aurora brought him home." "I did what was necessary. Always have." "Necessary? Like when you convinced Father that a teenage mother would ruin the family name. You were 16. What kind of life could you have given him? Better than letting him accidentally marry his sister." A sharp intake of breath made us both turn. Tiffany stood frozen behind us, her eyes wide. "What did you just say?" "Nothing," Quinn snapped. "Get in line." But Tiffany stood her ground. "That's what my research was showing. Hector's adoption, the papers were processed through Uncle Bentley's firm, and the dates. They matched when you disappeared to Aunt Martha's, Aunt Prudence." Quinn grabbed Tiffany's arm. "You will not breathe a word of this, do you understand?" "Let her go." I stepped forward, my voice stronger than I felt. "She's right. And I have proof." I opened my clutch and pulled out the DNA test results, still sealed. Quinn's face went white. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." The wedding march started playing, and Aurora appeared at the end of the hall with our father. She looked radiant, innocent, completely unaware of the bomb about to detonate her life. "Please," Susan whispered, and I realized she'd heard everything. "If what you're saying is true, wait until after the ceremony. Let me talk to him first." I looked at my son's adoptive mother, saw the fear and love in her eyes. "You didn't know either, did you?" She shook her head. "The agency, they said the birth mother wanted no contact, that she was at peace with her decision." "Another lie," I said, glaring at Quinn. Add it to the list. The processional began moving. Tiffany, torn between family loyalty and her budding investigative instincts, reluctantly took her place in line. Quinn gripped my arm one last time. Think about Aurora. Think about what this will do to her. I am thinking about Aurora and Hector and 24 years of lies. As the bridesmaids started their walk down the aisle, I saw Bentley whispering urgently to my father. The old man's face was ashen as he held Aurora's arm, leading her toward an impossible future. I clutched the envelope tighter, feeling the weight of 2 decades of silence pressing down on me. The DNA results could confirm what that birthmark and those photos already told me, but did I need them? Looking at Hector's face, my father's face, I knew the truth in my bones. The coordinator gestured for me to take my place in line. In moments, my children would stand before God and family, about to make a terrible mistake, unless I stopped it. Last chance, Quinn whispered again, but this time I heard the fear in her voice. She knew me well enough to recognize my resolve. I stepped into line, my heart pounding. Ahead of me, Aurora and our father paused at the entrance to the ceremony space. The guests rose, music swelled, and Hector beamed at his bride, his sister, with pure love and joy. I had less than 50 steps to decide. Let the ceremony begin and keep our secrets buried, or speak up and detonate every relationship in this room. I took my first step down the aisle, the truth burning in my throat. Each step down the aisle felt like walking through quicksand. Aurora floated ahead of me, her white dress catching the light from the stained glass windows. Hector's smile grew wider as she approached, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. Eyes that matched mine exactly. The minister began his welcome, his voice echoing through the chapel. Dearly beloved. Tiffany caught my eye from her place among the bridesmaids, subtly holding up her phone. A text message glowed on the screen. I have the adoption records. DNA test might not be needed. Quinn noticed the exchange and shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Behind her, Bentley was typing furiously on his phone, probably trying to contain the situation through legal channels. My father sat rigid, his knuckles white around his cane. If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, the traditional words hung in the air. Quinn's head snapped toward me, her eyes pleading. Susan dabbed at tears, happy tears that would soon turn to something else. The envelope in my clutch felt like it was made of lead. Speak now or forever hold your peace. My throat closed up. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. Aurora and Hector turned slightly, wondering about the delay. I saw my daughter's face, radiant with joy, and my son's expression, full of love and hope. The minister cleared his throat, about to continue, when Tiffany suddenly stood up. I have something to say. Tiffany, sit down, Quinn hissed. No. My niece's voice was shaking but determined. I'm sorry, but there's something everyone needs to know. I've been researching adoption records for my criminology project, and I found— This is neither the time nor place, Bentley interrupted, standing up. Then when is? I heard myself say, rising from my seat. When would be a good time to tell them? Aurora turned fully now, her veil swishing. Tell us what? Mum, what's going on? Hector's hand, the one with the birthmark, reached for hers. The gesture broke something in me. That birthmark, I said, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. You got it from me. What? Hector's confusion was genuine, painful to witness. Prudence, don't, my father warned, struggling to his feet, but the truth was already spilling out. Unstoppable now. 24 years ago, I had a baby boy. My family forced me to give him up for adoption. They arranged everything through Bentley's law firm, kept all the records buried. Mom, Aurora's voice cracked. What are you saying? She's saying nothing, Quinn interjected. She's just upset about the wedding. I'm saying, I continued, pulling out the envelope, that I recognized that birthmark the moment I met Hector. I knew in my heart, but I got a DNA test to be sure. and Tiffany found the adoption records that prove it. The chapel erupted in gasps and murmurs. Susan stood up, swaying slightly. But the agency said they told us the birth mother wanted no contact. Another lie. I turned to my children, both of them now. I never wanted to give you up, Hector, and I never wanted to hurt either of you like this, but I couldn't let you. Let us what? Hector's voice was barely a whisper. Aurora's face had gone completely white. She looked at her bouquet, then at Hector's hand still holding hers. Understanding dawned in her eyes, and she dropped the flowers, stumbling backward. We're siblings, Tiffany finished quietly, holding up her phone. The adoption records confirm it. I'm so sorry. Hector released Aurora's hand like it had burned him. This can't be real. This can't be happening. It's happening because of her, Quinn pointed at me accusingly. She could have kept quiet, let you both be happy, but she had to make it about herself. Let them be happy, I shot back. By letting them commit... Stop! Aurora's scream cut through the chaos. Everyone just stop! She turned to our father, tears streaming down her face. Grandpa, is this true? Did you make Mum give up her baby? Did you know who Hector was when I brought him home? The old man seemed to age another decade before our eyes. I did what I thought was best. Best for who? Hector demanded, his voice shaking. For me, for Aurora, or for your precious family reputation? Susan was openly crying now. All these years. We lived in the same city. They could have grown up knowing each other as siblings, but instead... Aurora looked at her wedding dress, then at Hector, horror growing in her expression. Oh, God! Oh, God, we almost... She turned and ran down the aisle, her white dress billowing behind her. Hector stood frozen at the altar, looking lost and betrayed. The guests were whispering. Phones were coming out to record the drama. Aurora, wait! I called after her, but Tiffany was already following her out. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw 24 years of lost moments reflected in his tears. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I should have told you sooner. The truth was out now, but as I watched my daughter flee and my son crumble, I wondered if Quinn had been right about one thing. Some truths might be too devastating to bear. The chapel dissolved into chaos. Guests were standing, phones recording, voices rising in shock and confusion. Susan rushed to Hector's side, but he backed away from her reaching hands. Did you know? He demanded. Any of it? No, sweetheart, I swear. Susan's voice broke. The adoption agency. They told us it was closed, permanent. We never knew. Liar! Quinn's voice cut through the commotion. Everyone's lying. Prudence, show them the DNA test. Open it right now. My hands trembled as I pulled out the envelope. I don't need to open it. Look at him. Look at his face. His gestures. He's my son. Prove it, Bentley challenged, stepping forward. Because right now you've just destroyed 2 lives based on a birthmark and your imagination. Hector's eyes fixed on the envelope. Open it. The chapel fell silent as I tore the seal. The paper shook in my hands as I unfolded it, but before I could read it, Tiffany burst back through the doors. Aurora's locked herself in the bridal suite, she announced, breathless. She's not answering anyone. I'll go, I said, but Quinn blocked my path. Haven't you done enough? You've ruined everything. Their wedding, their relationship, their lives. Better than letting them get married, I shot back. How long were you going to keep this secret? Through their marriage? Their children? The word children made Hector visibly flinch. He grabbed the DNA results from my hands and scanned them quickly, his face draining of colour. It's true, he whispered. 99.9% probability of parent-child relationship. He turned to Susan. Mom, I need air. I can't... He stumbled down the aisle and out the door. Susan started after him, but my father's voice stopped everyone. Let him go. The old man looked ancient now, defeated. Let them both process this. Process this? I rounded on him. Like I got to process being sent away, like I got to process having my baby taken from me? You were 16. I was a mother. His mother. I pointed at the door Hector had just fled through. You had no right. I had every right, he roared, suddenly finding his old authority. I was protecting this family. You were protecting yourself, Tiffany interrupted. Everyone turned to stare at her. She held up her phone. I found the original paperwork. The adoption wasn't just about Aunt Prudence being young. There was a scandal brewing about to hit the newspapers. Something about misappropriated church funds. The timing of the adoption, it was a trade-off, wasn't it? The church agreed to bury the financial story if the situation with Prudence was handled quietly. The colour drained from my father's face. Quinn gasped. Father, is that true? He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. Oh my God, I breathed. It wasn't even about me being too young. It was about money. Your money. The guests were riveted now, watching our family implode in real time. Someone was definitely streaming this live. Get out, I told the onlookers, all of you. This wedding is obviously cancelled. As the murmuring crowd filed out, Susan approached me slowly. I need you to understand something. Whatever the circumstances, Hector was loved, is loved. We may not share blood, but he is my son too. I know, I said softly. I saw that in how you raised him. I'm not trying to take him from you. Then what are you trying to do? Bentley demanded. I'm trying to stop my children from making a terrible mistake. I'm trying to finally tell the truth. The truth? Quinn laughed bitterly. The truth is you couldn't leave well enough alone. You had to play the victim, the wronged mother. Consequences be damned. Consequences like letting siblings marry each other? Stop saying that. Everyone turned. Aurora stood in the doorway, her makeup streaked with tears, her wedding dress crumpled. Stop talking about us like we're not real people, like we're just some tragedy in your family drama. She walked down the aisle, stopping in front of me. You knew. You knew for months, didn't you? You let us plan this whole wedding. Let us fall deeper in love. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I was afraid of losing you both. Well, congratulations. Her voice was ice. Now you might have managed exactly that. She turned to Quinn and our father. And you? You've been lying to everyone for decades, playing with people's lives like they're chess pieces. Aurora, sweetheart, Quinn started. Don't. Just don't. She pulled off her veil and let it fall to the floor. I need to find Hector. Not like before, but because right now he's the only other person who understands exactly how this feels. She walked out, leaving us all standing in the wreckage of secrets finally exposed. Through the stained glass windows, I could see guests still lingering in the parking lot, hungry for more drama. But the real drama was just beginning. 24 years of lies were unraveling, and none of us would emerge unscathed. I found them in the hotel's garden, sitting on opposite ends of a stone bench. They weren't speaking, just staring ahead, their matching profiles a punch to my gut. Tiffany stood nearby, acting as both guard and mediator. They won't let anyone else near them, she whispered as I approached. Not even Susan. Aurora spotted me first. Did you come to apologize again, or maybe drop another bomb? I came to listen, I said, staying a few feet away. If you'll let me. Hector turned, and the pain in his eyes made me flinch. Listen to what? How we feel about discovering we're siblings on our wedding day. How we've been living a lie. You're not the only ones who've been living a lie. Quinn's voice came from behind me. She walked into the garden, followed by our father, who looked like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. Oh, this should be good, Aurora said bitterly. More family secrets? Quinn wrung her hands. What happened back then? It wasn't just about father's scandal or Prudence's age. I was pregnant too. The silence that followed was deafening. What? I whispered. I lost the baby at 3 months. Nobody knew except father and Bentley. When you got pregnant, Prudence, Quinn's voice cracked. I was so angry, so jealous. It seemed unfair that you, the irresponsible one, could have what I'd lost. So you punished me. Punished my son. I convinced father that adoption was the only option. Used his scandal as leverage. She looked at Hector. I made sure you went to a good family, but I wanted you far away from us. From my pain. Our father stepped forward, leaning heavily on his cane. I let my shame and Quinn's grief cloud my judgment. The money, the scandal, they were excuses. The truth is, I failed all of you. Failed us? Hector stood up. You destroyed us. Do you have any idea what this feels like? To discover the person you love most in the world is your sister. Aurora made a small broken sound. We talked about having children. Stop, I pleaded. You couldn't have known. But you knew, Aurora shot to her feet. You knew for months. Every dress fitting, every planning session, you sat there and watched us fall deeper into this nightmare. I tried to find the right moment. The right moment? Hector's laugh was hollow. Maybe before I proposed? Before we fell in love? Before we... He cut himself off, looking sick. Tiffany stepped forward. There's something else you should know. She held up her phone. The adoption records show more than just the connection. They show a pattern of similar arrangements through Uncle Bentley's firm. Other families, other secrets. Quinn went pale. Bentley said those records were sealed. They were. I'm just very good at what I do. Tiffany looked at me. This wasn't just about your baby, Aunt Prudence. It was a whole operation. Rich families making problems disappear. My father sank onto the bench. Bentley assured me it was all legal. Legal doesn't mean right, I said. Where is Bentley now? Gone, Quinn whispered. He left as soon as Tiffany mentioned the records, probably destroying evidence as we speak. Aurora stood up suddenly. I can't process all this right now. My wedding day has turned into some kind of twisted crime documentary. Aurora, Hector reached for her automatically, then pulled back. They both flinched at the instinctive gesture. Don't, she said softly. I need space. From all of you. She turned to leave, but stopped short. Susan stood in the garden entrance, holding a small wooden box. Before you go, she said, there's something you both should have. She opened the box, revealing a stack of letters. These came to our house over the years. No return address, but now I know. She looked at me. They're from your mother. Your real mother. You wrote to me? Hector's voice cracked. Every year on your birthday, I whispered. I never knew if they were delivered. I kept them all, Susan said. I always felt you should have them someday. Aurora stared at the letters. Did you write to me too? Every day in my heart, I said. But you were with me. These letters, they were my only connection to your brother. Hector took the box with trembling hands. I can't. I need time. We all do, Aurora said. She looked at Hector, really looked at him, for the first time since the revelation. We need to figure out who we are to each other now. Your family, Quinn said quietly. However twisted the path, however much we all messed up, that's the truth. Truth? Aurora's laugh was bitter. The truth is that everyone in this family is really good at keeping secrets, but really bad at being honest. She walked away, her wedding dress trailing in the grass. Hector clutched the box of letters and followed, keeping his distance, but clearly needing to be near the only other person who understood his pain. I watched my children leave together, yet further apart than they'd ever been. The sun was setting behind the hotel, casting long shadows across the garden where a wedding should have happened. Instead, we stood in the wreckage of decades of secrets, wondering if anything would ever be right again. The hotel bar was nearly empty when Tiffany found me there an hour later. She slid onto the stool next to mine, placing her phone on the counter. Aurora's checked into a room upstairs, she said. Hector's in his car in the parking lot reading your letters. I stared at my untouched wine. And Susan? Talking to the wedding planner about refunds. She paused. The police are here. That got my attention. What? Not for you. For Uncle Bentley. Turns out those adoption records I found. There were irregularities, money changing hands that shouldn't have, missing paperwork. And get this, some of the birth certificates were falsified. Prudence. Quinn's voice made us both turn. She looked exhausted, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. The police want to talk to all of us. Apparently my husband's been running quite the operation through his firm. Did you know? I asked. About the illegal adoptions? No. About the money? She sank onto a bar stool. I knew we were comfortable. I never asked questions. Like you never asked questions about what happened to my baby. I deserved that. She ordered a drink. But you're not innocent either, Prudence. You knew for months about Aurora and Hector. Stop fighting, Tiffany interrupted. The police need statements about the adoption process. They're talking to Hector now. As if summoned by his name, my son appeared in the doorway. His eyes were red and he held one of my letters in his hand. You wrote that you used to sing "You Are My Sunshine" to me in the hospital, he said, his voice rough. Susan, my mom, she always sang that too. Said it felt right somehow. Hector, Susan appeared behind him. The police need to speak with me about the adoption paperwork. I'll come with you, he said, but stopped short. I mean, if you want me to. I'll always want you with me. Susan's voice broke. You're my son, no matter what these records show. They left together, leaving me with Quinn and Tiffany. The bartender tactfully moved to the other end of the bar. Aurora's asking for you, Tiffany said softly. Both of you. We found Aurora in her hotel room, still in her wedding dress, surrounded by crumpled tissues. She looked up as we entered. I've been thinking, she said, about what happens next, about what we tell people. The truth is already out there, Quinn said. Those guests had phones. The truth? Aurora laughed sharply. Which truth? That my mother gave up her baby? That my aunt and grandfather conspired to hide it? That I almost married my brother? Aurora, I started, but she held up her hand. No, let me finish. I've been reading the messages coming in. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's choosing sides. But you know what nobody's talking about? How Hector and I feel. Quinn sat on the edge of the bed. Tell us. We're victims here. All of us. You, she pointed at Quinn, lost a baby and let it poison you. You, she turned to me, lost your son and let fear keep you silent. And now Hector and I, we've lost each other. But not really, because we never really had each other. Not the way we thought. A knock at the door revealed Hector and Susan, followed by my father, leaning heavily on his cane. The police are done with us for now, Susan said, but they'll need to speak with everyone involved in the adoption. Including Bentley? Quinn asked quietly. If they find him, Hector said. He's gone, left everything behind. My father sank into a chair. I never thought. The money he paid for my silence about the church funds, it came from these illegal adoptions. It wasn't just about the money, Tiffany added, checking her phone. The records show a pattern. Rich families, scandals buried, babies relocated. It was about power and control. And now? Aurora stood, her wedding dress rustling. What happens now? Now we tell the truth, I said. All of it. No more secrets. The whole truth, Quinn looked terrified. About everything? Everything. I turned to my children, both of them. You deserve that much. Everyone deserves that much. Hector moved to stand beside Aurora, close but not touching. We need to figure out how to be siblings, how to love each other differently. Aurora nodded, tears falling. And we need our parents, all of our parents, even the ones who messed up. Susan stepped forward. We can figure this out, together. My father cleared his throat. The police, they'll want to know about my role in all this, about the church funds, about pressuring Prudence. Then you'll tell them, Quinn said firmly. We all will. No more hiding. Tiffany's phone buzzed. The media's outside. They want statements. We all looked at each other. This broken, complicated family brought together by lies, but maybe, just maybe, saved by truth. Together, Aurora said, reaching for Hector's hand, then mine. We face this together. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like hope. The media circus outside the hotel had grown into a full 3-ring spectacle. Camera lights flashed through the lobby windows as our family huddled near the entrance. "Ready?" I asked, looking at Aurora and Hector. "No," Aurora smiled weakly. "But when has that stopped us today?" We stepped out together into the wall of cameras and microphones. The questions came fast and furious. Is it true about the illegal adoption ring? Did you know they were siblings? What about the church scandal? Aurora raised her hand, still in her wedding dress, and the crowd quieted. "Today was supposed to be my wedding day," she began, her voice steady. "Instead, it became the day our family's secrets finally came to light. Yes, Hector and I discovered we're siblings. Yes, there was an illegal adoption network. And yes, our family made terrible mistakes." Hector stepped forward. "But we're not here to sensationalize our pain. We're here because the truth matters. Because other families deserve to know if their adoptions were part of this network." "Bentley's firm handled dozens of adoptions," Tiffany added, holding up her phone. "We're working with the authorities to identify other affected families," a reporter pushed forward. "Quinn, what do you say to allegations that your husband orchestrated this entire operation?" Quinn straightened her spine. "I say that my husband will have to answer for his crimes, as will anyone else involved, including me." "And what about the church funds?" Another shouted at my father. He gripped his cane tighter. "I made mistakes, used my position to hide uncomfortable truths. That ends today." Susan moved to stand beside Hector. "What matters now is healing. These children, all of them, deserve better than the secrets we built around them." "And what happens next?" someone called out. I looked at my children, really looked at them. Aurora, strong and poised even in her pain. Hector, holding himself together while his world fell apart. Both of them victims of choices made before they were born. "What happens next?" I said. "Is we rebuild. Not the lies and secrets, but something true. Something real." "Starting with this," Aurora added, reaching for her brother's hand. "Learning to love each other in a new way. The right way." Hector squeezed her hand. "We're not victims of our parents' choices anymore. We're survivors who get to choose what happens next." The cameras flashed faster, but something had shifted. The hunger for scandal was being replaced by something else. Recognition of a family choosing truth over comfort. Healing over hiding. "One last question," a reporter called. "What would you say to other families who might be affected by this adoption network?" "Come forward," Tiffany answered. "The police have set up a hotline. Don't let fear keep you silent." "And to those who kept these secrets," another pressed. Quinn stepped forward. "I'd say it's time to stop protecting reputations and start protecting people. The truth hurts, but secrets destroy." As if to punctuate her words, a police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, and Quinn straightened her shoulders. "That's my cue," she said quietly. "Time to make my statement official." "I'll go with you," our father said. "My statement too." Aurora hugged them both before they left with the officers. The media surged forward again, but Tiffany and Susan created a barrier, guiding us back inside. In the quiet of the lobby, Aurora finally let her composure crack. "I need to get out of this dress." "I'll help," Susan offered, then looked at me. "Both of us?" I nodded, understanding the olive branch being extended. Hector watched them go, then turned to me. "Those letters you wrote, every single one talked about how much you loved me, how much you wanted me." "I never stopped wanting you, never stopped loving you." "I know that now." He pulled out the last letter from his pocket. "This one's different, though. It's recent." I recognized it, the letter I'd written but never sent after meeting him 6 months ago. "You knew then," he said. "You wrote about seeing your smile on my face, about hearing Dad's laugh in mine. Why didn't you tell me right away?" "Because I was afraid. Of losing you again. Of hurting Aurora. Of facing what my silence had allowed to happen." "Fear makes us do terrible things," he said. Keep terrible secrets. Not anymore, I promised. No more secrets. Aurora and Susan returned. Aurora now in simple clothes, looking more like herself. So, she said, what now? Now we figure out how to be a family, Susan answered. All of us. Together, Hector added, reaching for both his mother's hands. Aurora joined our circle, completing it. Outside, cameras still flashed, police lights still pulsed, and somewhere Bentley was running from his crimes. Our family's story would be headlines tomorrow, next week, maybe longer. But standing there holding hands with my children and the woman who'd raised my son, I knew we'd find our way through. Not because it would be easy. It wouldn't. Not because the pain was gone. It wasn't. But because the truth, however hard, had finally set us free. Together, I echoed, and felt their hands tighten around mine in response. The secrets were out. The healing could begin.